should I split equity with my co-founder 50-50?
Oh, man. Let me open by saying on Startups.com, we have an entire course on it's called Splitting Equity, and it goes deep on this topic. Here's my opinion, and I'll caveat this by saying everyone has a bias, everyone has an opinion. What I try to do when I'm giving this advice, when I'm having this opinion, is I try to not just look at my own experiences, which are generally good with co-founders, but that of all other founders as well. We talk to thousands and thousands of founders. There's over 1 million founders on the Startups.com platform, so we get to see a lot. So what I try to do, and I know, Ed, you try to do the same, is take the benefit of everybody else's experience.
Sure.
But with all that said, all that preamble, the first thing I would say is that this is the most expensive decision you're ever going to make professionally. Why did you make it so easily?
Yeah, a lot of founders do that.
You just said, I don't want to give up investors more than 10%, but you just gave some random person that you met at a startup weekend half your company just because they said they'd build an MVP over the weekend. Yep. How did that happen? Like, what is that process? What do you think?
It's crazy because I think founders don't look at equity like equity. They just look at it as participation points or something like that. So they get desperate and they say, I need a technical co-founder, and then shotgun. Like, I was reading Reddit. Oh my word. Like, how many times do you see stories of like, I offered and I have a technical person that I met, I got them off of whatever website and I give 50% of the company, or they're college buddies of mine. Now they're lazy and I don't know if I want them anymore, but now they have me held over a barrel. Like, how many times have we seen that story, Will?
So many times. And so over my 30 plus years of starting companies, I've had a lot of co-founders. Now, and I've had generally good relationships with all of them. I've only been in one situation, maybe two, where I've ever had a co-founder that I felt was outworking me. And I work like a madman. So that's saying a lot. And it's funny, I was just talking to one of them yesterday. One of my first companies, ad agency that I started back in the 90s. And, we grew that to a large company. And I was talking to him. He and I, this is like in the 90s when we were scaling this company, would have almost like an informal competition of who would be in the office first every day. And I'm talking like 5 a.m. I'm not talking about like by 9 or 10, right? I'm talking like if the sun was up, you came in way too late, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Now, and for years, for like a decade, every waking hour. Now, I'm not recommending this whatsoever. What I'm trying to say is, at no point in that relationship did I ever say that guy's not earning his keep.
Yes.
Now, how many relationships do I see that look like that? Almost none. Almost none.
Especially in startups.
No, that's what I'm saying, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm saying most of the folks that I see within year one, not even year two, right? Within year one of the quote marriage are like, why am I doing all the work? Like, this person was super useful when we didn't know how to build an MVP, but now we're trying to scale a company. They've never had a direct report. How do they own half the company? And I'm like, yes, exactly that,
I'm going to throw something out there, Will. And I think what we're saying is, one, don't make the decision willy-nilly. This is a very important decision. And that's where founders get in trouble. How many times have we seen, like, I've seen totally great startups get blown apart because the founders don't end up getting along. And then one founder takes the patent, one founder takes the website, on the existing software. And like, nobody ends up with anything, right? And it's just that fighting. But Will, I'm going to say that I always want to give my co-founder 50-50, especially if they're in the early inception stages. If they come on as the founding team right after I've built the MVP, everything like that, then it's not a 50-50 conversation ever. But I want to give my co-founder 50-50. Does it rarely work out that way? In all my 7 startups, it's only worked out once. And so I think that lends credence to what you're talking about, Will.
Here's what I would say. For the stuff that worked or didn't work for me, I honestly don't think it never came down to who my co-founder was. I think, fortunately, we got along well enough that the company was the problem, not us. So I'll take the win on that. However, what I always want people to understand is in the formative stages, let's call it that first 6 to 24 months, you're still dating the idea and the co-founder. You are not ready to get married. Okay, so let me give that some context. Ed, you and I started a company. You and I have known each other for a few years personally, and we decided that we're going to venture out and do this thing together, okay? There's a whole bunch of stuff that we don't know about each other, okay? Some of it we actually just can't know. For example, let's say we're both 25 years old and we're both starting the company. You don't know that your girlfriend is about to get pregnant in 6 months.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
You literally don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. And you guys are going to start a family and all bets are off. This is what I'm saying. This isn't all like, hey, the other person's just terrible. It's life happens. But except it happens every single time. Okay. Other examples. We get into this. We're 12 months into it, 18 months into it. And you're like, dude, I quit my job for this because I thought we'd have enough money coming in either through investors or through revenue so that I could keep paying my mortgage. But I've got like 2 months left to live financially. I need to get out of this. Okay, cool. You own half the company. So you're saying now you can just leave and go get another job and pay your bills, which I get, but how does that help me?
Exactly.
Right. And this isn't me being selfish. I'm like, I'm going to come to work for the same amount of equity you are, except you're not going to come to work. That's a big problem, but it happens all the time.
And not only that, you might have to go hire somebody to come step in who can work all those free hours. And what are you going to give them when your cap table is jammed up with basically dead equity?
Every time I hear somebody say, I'm about to give this person equity, my first question is, what are your other top 3 choices? And I say that facetiously. The question is the point. I know there are no other choices. Okay. So play that out for a second. Imagine, and I think the parallels matter. Imagine you're doing this in your dating life, in your personal life. Okay. And you're 19 years old. And your son comes to you and says, Dad, I met the person of my dreams. And you're like, this is the first person you've ever dated. And he's like, yep. Have you considered maybe dating someone else before you get married? Nope. I met him a week ago. It looks good. Everything works. It's the same concept, right? Where you're making one of the biggest life choices that you'll ever make with no selection criteria whatsoever. The CTO's qualification in almost every startup I see is that he was the only person willing to write the code.
Default. Yeah.
Right. And so that qualification earns them 50% of the company. It's bananas if you think about it in this context.
There are other things that founders can think about, and maybe you want to make some comment on the different mechanisms, vesting schedules and cliffs. Very important. Operating agreements. For example, you got a vesting schedule and a cliff. You don't get anything unless you stick around for a year, and then you're going to vest over 4 years. On top of which, operating agreement. If I bring on a co-founder and I've had a 50-50 relationship with them, and I'm the CEO, I have the right to fire that co-founder. It is written down.
As an employee.
Yeah, but I also get agreements in here, and maybe I'm being Machiavellian about this, but because I've been burned so many times, I say, if I fire you as a co-founder, the board agrees, etc., you walk with 5% equity. I don't care if you vested 25%. And that makes us all really sit down and think about it. It's kind of like that whole marriage thing. It's like, let's agree on the vows. Let's agree on how serious it is, who's going to take out the garbage, where we're going to vacation. Do we have in-laws living with us? Because this is going to be possibly till death do us part, hopefully. But when you've got co-founders, we're talking about a 10-year journey to get to that almighty exit, possibly later. And so hope for the best, plan for the worst. There are ways for founders to do that.
There's a reason when investors put in money, they change all the terms in the operating agreement, because there's no version where they're like, hey, let's just see how it goes, right? I'll just give you a couple $1 million. You'll get some percentage. We'll just see how it goes. We don't really need any terms around it. It's because when we get started, when we first launch, first off, we don't have options. So the person we gave 50% of our equity to, because they're the only person that can write code, I joke about who else did you interview? No one. It was literally the only option I had. So it's not like I had 10 other options and I opted for this person to 50%. It was the only way in my mind that I was going to get that done at that time. I get that. Okay. However, we end up making these perennially bad decisions when we're most vulnerable.
Yes.
So when founders come to me, and they do quite a bit, and they say, hey, I found like a technical co-founder, which tends to come up the most. I found a technical co-founder and I'm trying to figure out what kind of equity stake to give to them. Here's what I say. We'll get to the equity stake in a minute. How much to give them? The first thing I want you to understand is there's an almost certainty that within a year, you're not going to want them there. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't I want somebody building my product? You will, just not necessarily that person, right? Because you're going to find out they have a life situation. They're impossible to work with. You know, their expectations are bananas, whatever. You're going to find out some shit. And we need to make sure that before you pick any amount of equity, you have a way out of it. And Ed, you nailed it. It's investing. And for some of you folks that have never heard about vesting or a vesting schedule, et cetera, Google it, look it up, understand it. It basically means you don't get all the equity until you hit certain milestones. For the percentage, once again, I'm going to refer back to the Startups.com site. Go find the splitting equity course. And we go into infinite detail about how to look at what percentage to give people based on, I don't know, things like contribution that you actually make, not just random ass percentages that you give to people because it looks even on a pie chart. And we talk about things like, how much are you going to actually contribute? How much are you going to contribute compared to what I'm going to contribute over what period of time? There's a lot more to this, too much to unpack here, but trust me, this stuff has been thought out. It's probably the most valuable thing you'll ever watch or listen to because it could save you tens of millions of dollars down the road.
Well said.